Hello there, best of Trekkers! I'd like to thank my friend Dell for suggesting the topic of Riker's many romantic conquests and escapades for this edition of...
Yeah, it's the best five, worst five, no one has seen. Yeah, it's the best five, worst five Treks ever seen.
William T. Riker probably has more flings and one-off romances than James T. Kirk, and that's really saying something. Rankings in this category are quite subjective, but based on Riker's happiness surrounding the romance, and what positive or negative repercussions come of it. Per the norm, we're starting with the fifth worst. Needles of Love. Though never seen on screen, Tactical Officer Rebecca Smith was new to the Enterprise D by the middle of the final season in Genesis. The Arboretum has often been mentioned in the show as a place to have a romantic foray. But for Riker, this one-off romance ends in a sickbay visit due to rolling over on a Siberian cactus. This shows Riker will do anything for love, but he probably won't do that again. Number 4. First Contact. In the TNG episode of the same name, Will is undercover as a Malkorian in preparation for contact ahead of the race's first warp flight. A set of unfortunate circumstances lands him in the hospital with a nurse named Linnell. As it becomes clear he's not of that world and tries to escape, it triggers a fantasy for this nurse of an encounter of the Riker kind. While it's played up as a funny means of escape, she's actively sexually harassing him and extorting him for information on how to leave the hospital. Only the Rick Berman years of Trek could turn harassment into a joke about calling her the next time he's in her star system. Number 3. Completely non-consensual. The young Q, Amanda Rogers, seemingly takes an interest in Riker from the moment she comes aboard. After Jean de Q teaches her a bit about her powers, she uses them to steal Will away to her own private romance novel fantasy setting. Male attire in Trek is usually horrid-looking onesies with a neutral color scheme. If this scene gives us any positive, it's Riker dressed to the nines in full top hat and coat. But he's not into it, and no should mean no. But not to a Q with the power to force you to love them, though. She thankfully reconsiders this fantasy rather quickly, but this was borderline assault. Number 2. Clan Fatale. Maybe it's because Riker dabbles in being a chef, both personally and holographically, that turned his gaze towards Akamarian royal chef Yuta. Unbeknownst to him, she was 100-some-odd-year-old genetically designed killer of Clan Telestra, carrying out ancient blood feuds on the remaining members of the former clans. When Will figures out what she's up to, he's forced to straight up vaporize her with a phaser when a lower setting won't work. Though she was right in front of you, dude. Tackle her, maybe? Seems a little un-Starfleet to just go in shooting, but I bet he felt a bit betrayed. And the worst fling Riker ever had at number 1? The Gamester of Risa. TNG's The Game is the epitome of the phrase, loose lips sink ships. Despite the impression that Risa is all horgons and happy times, those times seem to go south every time one of our main characters visits the planet of love. On this particular occasion, while Will's busy chasing the Qatarian named Atana around their room, she's busy sizing him up as an instrument to infiltrate the entire Federation, starting with the flagship. And if it weren't for those meddling kids and their android, she would have gotten away with it too. Riker looked like he was going to have a pretty good time, so it's a shame this turned out to be a love made on the Black Mountain. As we shuttle our way through the tunnel of love to the best Riker romances, if you're enjoying the content, please consider a like and subscribe. At 5th best, Forgotten Feud. With everyone losing their memory in Conundrum, it gives Will and Ro a chance to start over, not disrespecting her for a difficult situation that saw her court-martialed, shows that under different circumstances, they could have had something special. There's something beautiful about this juxtaposition, and it's one of the most passionate hookups we ever see Riker engage in. I do feel kinda bad for him at the end after memories are restored, and Deanna and Laren walk away to presumably gossip about him. Would love to be a spider under that table. Number 4. Not Meant to Be. While all we know about Carmen da Silva comes from the pre-credit teaser of Silicon Avatar, we get the impression that she and Riker have a strong attraction to one another. One that could have led to Riker settling down on this new Federation colony. But alas, this love would not last much past the episode title screen, when the crystalline entity shows up to feed and costs Will the chance to have a picket fence and simpler life. For that matter, though, given the lack of oxygen in the cave they are taking refuge in, Data was nearly the only being left by the entity for the second time. For Riker, though, his dream of family would have to wait. Number 3. Endearing Envy. TNG's The Outcast is one of the deepest dives into the idea of non-binary issues seen on popular television by the early 90s. And Riker's involvement with one is probably the most interesting short encounter, even if it doesn't end well. The ending feels like the writers wrote themselves into a corner here and had to artificially break up this great start of a romance between Will and Soren. Worst of all, they depict conversion therapy as being an all-better moment after a solid episode of Queer Topics. Number 2. Meeting the Light Woman. One of Riker's earliest love interests in 11001001 wasn't even a flesh and blood lady. She was a distraction that even roped the hard-to-love Picard into being sidelined while the Bynars stole the Enterprise. The reason Minuet ranks this highly is because she clearly stuck in Riker's mind, to the point he tried to recreate her to no avail. Moreover, 3 years later in Future Imperfect, we find out that she's never really left his mind and was his faux love interest, to the point she was his wife and baby mama. Flesh and blood, or photons and force fields, love is love. And the unsurprising number 1 love interest for Riker, Imzadi. For a former romance we were introduced to in the very first episode of TNG, it took quite a few twists and turns before becoming a wedding in the cast's final movie. While they were generally just friends, probably with benefits, through TNG, there are some moments that make you question how broken up they really are, like a romantic picnic on Beta Z gone wrong in Menage a Troi, and a rapidly aging Deanna in Man of the People throwing herself at Will in the showiest nightgown to ever make it past 90s censors. Pretty much the only good thing about one of Trek's worst movies, Insurrection, was the two formally rekindling their love. This leads to a heartbreaking start to a family from the pair, and some tension in the aftermath, but proves their bond is unlikely to be broken. What's your favorite Riker romance?